Guys, I only get one chance a year to fish this amazing body of water for smallmouth bass, and despite all my preparation, collecting all the tackle, doing all the research I need to be successful, I'm afraid I'm going to screw things up if I don't pick the right lures and fish them effectively. So am I going to go home empty-handed, or do I have what it takes to pick the right lures that are going to land me some big smallmouth bass? Join me as I share the story of my latest fishing trip, bass fishing the Thornapple River.
Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go!
My plan on this trip is to fish 3 miles of the winding, beautiful Thornapple River in West Michigan, targeting primarily smallmouth, and I'm holding out hope that I'm able to land a fish that I have not caught in a very long time. I absolutely adore this river. The scenery alone is worth it, but it also boasts numerous numbers of species of fish that are just a ton of fun to catch. To say I was excited for this trip would be an understatement. I've been planning it for months, but I've only got one shot at this, and I do not want to screw it up by picking lures the bass are not going to bite. So which ones are going to work? I didn't really know, but I did know that I was going to start with 3 lures because I brought 3 rods with me. After much internal debate, considering my history with the river, what's worked, what hasn't, and the current conditions of the day, I decided on these lures. A Mepps Nitro Spin Bucktail, a Texas rigged 4-inch Yum Dinger, and a Bass Pro Chaos Shad, which is basically Bass Pro's version of the Whopper Plopper. And there are a few reasons why I selected these lures. Since the Thornapple River is a windy little river that has lots of current breaks and produce lots of slack water where bass and other fish will hang out in, just to chill or lie in wait for some food to get washed downriver for them to prey on. The plan was to let my kayak drift downriver with the current and then use the Mepps spinner while I'm drifting. When I came across big sections of slack water that deserved more attention, I'd anchor up alongside or downstream from the slack water and work that area, including the current seam, with all 3 lures. The river also has lots of grass beds that can make fishing with subsurface treble hooked lures difficult. That's why I went with the Chaos Shad and the Yum Dinger. The top water would do well to stay above the grass, and the Yum Dinger's ability to be rigged weedless is a great feature for working it through the grass. With my plan mapped out and my gear ready to go, it was time to start fishing.
All right, kid. You better be right about this.
Although an unforeseen problem arose immediately after launching. My anchor was doing a poor job of being an anchor. The Grand Rapids area had recently gotten a lot of rain, forcing the engineers to open up the dam a bit to let excess water through, causing that section of river to rise and to speed up the current quite a bit. At the first spot just downstream from the launch point, the anchor did manage to catch a rock, enabling me to cast up to a fallen tree. I worked this spot for 30 minutes with no success, which was really disappointing because I've caught some great fish at that spot in previous trips. Still, there were miles of river ahead of me, so it was time to move on. As I started to drift, I cast the Mepps back up into the current scene, and that's when I hooked into something. I had a shot at getting that dreaded skunk out of the boat pretty early on. Sure enough, I landed this baby smallie who was a cute little guy, but I'm looking for its big brothers and sisters. Once it was clear to me that he was not going to give me the information I wanted, I told him to go eat a steak, hit the gym, so that one day he could make my future personal best, and I let him go. Now, if you're a regular subscriber or viewer of my channel, you're probably wondering, hey Chris, can we hear the audio of you catching the fish while you're catching it instead of you just talking the whole time? And to that I would say, that is a great question, and I wish I could do that, but I can't.
Oh, come on!
Before the trip even got started, a problem that has plagued me for months reared its ugly head, and it has everything to do with this. For the last year or so, I've had serious audio issues with my GoPro. It will suddenly start making this annoying popping and scratching sound. Either this happens or the audio disappears altogether. I've gone through great lengths to fix this problem by replacing the mic and the mic adapter, and still the problem persists. After doing some research, much to my horror, the problem lies with the GoPro itself. These audio issues have apparently plagued several generations of GoPro cameras, including the newest models, and there's no fixing it. Despite the hundreds of thousands of complaints from customers, GoPro has seemingly buried its head in the sand and refused to address the problem. As much as I hate to say it, I may be back in the market for a new camera soon. Now, that's not to say the trip was a total loss. You guys will get some really good audio here in a little while. But my peak annoyance during post-production came with this next part, because what's about to happen was totally awesome. Shortly after I caught the baby smallie, I came around the next bend that had a really big current break, exactly what I planned on targeting. The initial drift along the seam didn't produce anything, so I paddled back a little bit to the slack water where I made some casts into this grassy flat. That's when it happened. 3 or 4 casts into that spot, boom. What I believed to be a big smallie devoured that Mepps spinner down in the grass, and it was fighting like an absolute unit. Several seconds into the fight, I still hadn't got a good look at the fish until it worked its way out of the grass, where I finally finally saw what was on the end of my line and I could not believe it. I finally hooked a fish that I had not caught in several years. It was a northern pike and I was praying that it didn't spit the hook or cut the line because I was only rocking a 20-pound leader. I managed to get the fish in the net, but my excitement quickly turned to horror when I noticed the pike was gill hooked. As quickly and gently as I could, I removed the lure from its gill to let it rest in the net so it would regain its strength. Unfortunately, the damage had been done, and despite me spending the next 20 minutes trying to revive it, the fish just wasn't going to make it. As much as I hate it when this kind of thing happens, if you fish long enough, stuff like this is going to happen. In the end, I kept the pike since it met Michigan's minimum length limit of 24 inches, and it did provide my family with a good meal, so at least it didn't go to waste.
She's a fish killer.
But I'm done shedding tears for this one small fish. I got big smallies to catch. I continued drifting down the river to the next bend, which had another current break and a thick bed of grass. And just as I hoped, working the edge of the grass yielded some results. Something hit the meps on the first pass and it turned out to be a little largemouth bass. While I was glad to catch this little fella, it didn't satisfy my craving for big smallies. But maybe this bed held one of its bigger cousins. Once again, this tiny man wouldn't give me the intel I desired because these guys never tell me anything, so I cut him loose. I worked this spot with all 3 lures for the next 15 to 20 minutes, but the only thing I had to show for it was that little largie. That's okay though, I got plenty of river ahead of me. Over the next several minutes, I drifted through a straight corridor at a pretty good clip thanks to the current, but there was plenty of bassy cover to cast into. This river has no shortage of laydowns, private docks, and rocky points that make little current breaks, and it did produce, as I saw more action by landing another little smallmouth. Unfortunately, I didn't get a great pic of this little guy because he would be embarrassed by his friends and family who would make fun of him for ending up on my YouTube channel. In his words, "You are the Clark Griswold of YouTube fishermen." Rude. But I did have a feeling if I just stuck to the game plan, I'd find the big smallies I was looking for. Eventually, this stretch took me past an island in the middle of the river, and on the downstream side of the island, there was a shallow, grassy flat that couldn't be more than 2 or 3 feet deep. Again, casting along the edge of the grass, something came out and smacked that meps pretty good, and anytime a fish strikes at a fast-moving lure in a current like this, it'll make your heart skip a beat. As it would turn out, what I had was another little smallmouth. Despite their size, these smallies were living up to their reputation as hard fighters. Once I let this little guy go, I knew I had to hammer the grass on the other side of this island, so after anchoring up just inside the current seam, I worked the chaos shad and the yum dinger in and out of this grass for some time, but nothing hit. At this point, I took a bit of a break, drank some water, reassessed the game plan to see if I should change anything. After some reflection, it was clear the bucktail spinner was working even if it wasn't catching the big bass, and for the other two, the bulk of my confidence remained with the top water and a finesse bait. I was convinced this approach was going to lead me to some big smallies. The only thing left to do was to pull anchor and continue downriver. However, I was about to run into another problem, and that problem was me. You ever have those moments in your life where you're metaphorically tripping over yourself because your shoelaces are tied together and you just can't do anything right? Well, that was basically me for the next 2 hours. I made one bad cast after another like I was the fishing version of Wild Thing for Major League.
Just a bit outside. He tried the corner and missed.
One of these bad casts took the mep spinner into a laydown where it got snagged, and upon retrieving the lure, I realized that getting the lure back resulted in one side of the treble being broken off. I mean, that's just great. This period of self-induced calamity peaked when I fired my Texas rig into a tree as I was seconds away from being swept into another tree, forcing me to quickly break the line and batten down the hatches before I got knocked out of the boat or it capsized. Thankfully, God kept me from completely embarrassing myself, but by now, I had no choice but to shift gears and strategy because I was running out of time and river at this point.
Maybe you suck at it.
I was still good with where I was targeting smallies, the slack water, the grass beds, laydowns, current seams, all that. My problem was with the lures. Due to my own stupidity, the meps was broken and I didn't have one similar to it. The closest thing were the big musky killers, and I just felt like those things were way too big. I considered some kind of a crankbait, but in the moment, I just didn't have any confidence in any of those. That's when I thought about the spinner baits. The inline spinner was working earlier, and spinner baits are similar enough. Initially, the H2OX bluegill pattern spinner bait sounded good, but something told me this was going to be way too big as well. That's when I finally decided to go with the smaller white Booyah Pond Magic that I added a white curly tail grub to for a trailer that would give it some additional action. Is this lure going to get me back in the winners column, or will it be a different one? Let's find out.
No time to waste.
Almost immediately, things started looking up when I resumed the float. My casting accuracy came back, and around this time, the camera audio came back too. What made the post-mid-float crisis even better was this section of river was starting to open up, making it quite a bit wider and slowing down the current to the point where I could work both the spinnerbait and the chaos shad pretty effectively on both sides of the river. Cast after cast, it felt like I was getting back into a bit of a groove, regaining some of that confidence, and it seemed as if it was only a matter of time before I struck gold. That's when this happened. There's a fish. All right, finally a fish. Uh-huh. All right, bass, I think. Uh-huh. Little smallmouth. All right, best smallie of the day for sure. Well, look at this beautiful bronze back. I freaking love fishing for these guys. Let's get them unhooked and back in the water. At this moment, I was so excited to catch this fish, I neglected to get a measurement on it. While it's no monster, I'm gonna take this fish every day, all day, especially with those colors. Beautiful fish. But you know what they say about the water? There's always a bigger, prettier fish. There's a fish. Yes, sir. Oh man, he's mad. I'd be mad too. Let's loosen up the drag a little bit, let him run. Oh yeah, that's it. That's a nice smallie right there. Got him. Well, check this gorgeous fella out. My gosh, these guys fight so dang hard. It's either smallies or flatheads for the hardest fighting fish that I've ever caught. All right, let's let them go. Again, I was so stoked to catch an even bigger, cooler looking smallmouth that I forgot to get a measurement on it. But ultimately, I don't care. All that matters is that 1, I got back home alive, and 2, I caught some decently sized smallmouth and a pike with these two guys, even if it took me all day.
Well, it's about time.
Well, that's all I got for you guys in this video. Let me know what you thought of it. If you did enjoy this one and want to watch more videos on my channel, I'll leave a couple options for you guys right here to pick from. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.